Our first video is from Nicholas Cafaro-Lamenza and Todd Whitney, and we're going to talk about nitrogen management and using the N calculator. All right.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Nicolás Cafaro-Lamenza. I'm a cropping system specialist here in West Central Research Extension and Education Center. And I'm here with Todd. And today we are going to talk about in-season nitrogen management for irrigated corn. How are you doing today, Todd?
Doing well, Nicholas. Yeah, I'm Todd Whitney. I'm an extension educator based here in North Platte, work with irrigation and cropping systems as well. And did want to say that this is a newer publication, and I think it's going to take into account some things that'll be helpful for people to be able to maybe save on some fertilizer costs by being able to account for some things that was maybe harder to do. We have had the 4 R's that have come forward where we're trying to recommend based upon the right source, the right rate, the right time, and the right place. And so what we're about here is trying to account for some of those things that are happening that we can say, well, in season, we can maybe adjust what our rates are putting on.
Yeah, exactly. So this new publication is an update of the nitrogen recommendation for the University of Nebraska. And some of the main things that we are pointing out in this publication, it goes to move a bit away from the fall application of nitrogen. So to basically do most of the nitrogen in season, and we are recommending about 60% or more of the nitrogen, try to do it in season. With that, there will be probably 50 to 100 pounds that probably will be applying at planting or pre-planting there, and then the rest trying to do it in season. And when we say in season, obviously split applications will be the best as much as possible. Then the in-season application using sensors where we are going to. So there are different ways, different farmers depending on their operation. They can adjust to the different type of applications that they could do to be efficient with the right time and the right amount of nitrogen as well. But the in-season using satellite or some high clearance applicators with sensor will be the optimal to improve as much as possible the efficiency. And as we see in this publication, which is the NEP Guide G2365, and you can access online and see all the details about how to improve the efficiency of nitrogen in season for corn in there. And part of that, it goes to the right time where we can see that most of the nitrogen is being uptake in that period BA to R2, and we are going to see that next and trying to target those applications in that timing.
Yeah, sometimes we are accused in extension of maybe having a little bit higher application rate, application recommendations. This is a publication that helps see that it does vary. And if you are able to put on just the right amount when the plant is actually needing it and not having to put it on early and then have some losses, you could see as much as a 30% reduction in the need for application of fertilizer based upon that you are adjusting more matching what's happening with the growth of the plant to how much nutrients you're putting on.
Exactly. So if we look here, and this is a graph that is also on the publication, this chart is showing, if we follow the black line, is showing the total nitrogen uptake during the growing season. Okay, from the very early in the season after we planted, and it is accumulating in percentage. You can see in black the percentage there, and up to the 100% of the total uptake at maturity, before harvest. Now, if we look at the green line and we're reading the right axis here, so the green line is telling the nitrogen uptake rate per day. So how many pounds of nitrogen that crop on average is uptaking per day. And what we can see here is that, for example, between that B8 and B12 that we mentioned before is where you have that big increase in the daily nitrogen uptake rate. And as you can see here in this example, for example, the peak, it came here around the B12 and it goes, that kind of peak, it goes from probably, the B8 and up to close to the R2, where it goes to a more flat rate. Then after that, in the peak, it goes to about 8 pounds of nitrogen per day per acre. So it's a really high rate of nitrogen uptake that the crop has at that time, and that's why that split application and probably concentrated during those periods is where you can have the best efficiency, besides moving out from applying most of the nitrogen in the fall that we are trying to not recommend anymore, and moving to more pre-plant or at planting and then distribute it in the season.
Yeah, and we do see a little bit of a peak up in that reproduction phase. And I think sometimes people ask about, well, what about the plumping of the kernels at the end of the season?
Yeah, well, there is. So if you see up to R2, it just dropped, and then it kept having like a rate that is probably between 1 and 1.5 pounds per day, which most likely, the soil mineralization will probably cover that. But most of the higher nitrogen uptake rates occur in that period that we just mentioned, probably between B8 and R2. So as we saw here about the timing, and we were talking about the moving out from application on the fall to go more pre-plant or at plant and then split most of the nitrogen in season. With that, there is a UNL corn nitrogen calculator, which initially, this came from research from the university, different timings of research that has been done, with all hybrids, and then newer, and then every I would say 10-15 years, we are redoing some of those and feed it with the on farm this nitrogen calculator that is updating all the time. Well, the thing is that in all the updates, it seems that the equation have been held pretty much in the same, that those recommendations about the amount of nitrogen were pretty much correct from the different times that it was tested. But this nitrogen calculator, has been first equations that came from research, then it came to an Excel file where people could input those amount of nitrogen in the soil, the yield goal, and then calculate in an Excel file. Now it's in a more user friendly, and we're going to dive into that and do an example on how you can use this UNL nitrogen calculator to check the rate of nitrogen that you are applying. Of course, as we said at the beginning, we are moving into trying to use more sensor based and a split application. You can use satellite or even high clearance with sensors if available. But from the beginning, the first thing is, well, how much is the total that you are planning to? And this tool is good for early planning and say, well, this is how much I am expecting to put per acre in this corn. Then you can adjust, especially if you have sensors to do in season application based on the status of the plant and the weather.
And what are some of the things that you think are really good about the new tool? Is it looks like it adjusts for the value of the crop, or and then maybe fertilizer prices, or what are some of the things you like about it?
Well, I guess we can go and check it. Yeah, it has so it includes the price of the corn, it includes the price of the fertilizer, it includes all the credits that you can get of the nitrogen. So not only the nitrogen available at planting or before planting that you do with the soil sampling, the organic matter, nitrogen, but then nitrogen from irrigation water if you sample, it may include some nitrogen from manure if you have. So include all the credits. It also help you to do different plans of the split. And it gives you a total amount of nitrogen that you're going to use and the efficiency that you're going to have with that plant that you do.
Is it still a free application, or what can they put it on?
Yeah, this is available free online, so you can access it on your laptop, you can access in your phone. So you go, you put UNL corn nitrogen calculator, and it will appear there, and then you click on and you can start using it. So I guess we can probably jump on the calculator and
maybe
check
we
it
could
out.
do an example or something.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Okay. All right. So here we have the UNL nitrogen calculator, for nitrogen calculator. So here's an example, it's a blank example, and you can accumulate all the fields here on the side, the different fields that you're doing or different years. So those are these different examples that I have been doing. So let's put the name to this. So do we
A demonstration.
demonstration. Okay. So what size, Todd? What size of the field?
Let's go 126 acres, which is about the size of a pivot.
Okay, 126 acre.
128 maybe.
So then we have a tab here that we can check the texture. There are not many options, but mid-fine it will be probably most cases, and especially if you're in West Central area, probably you will have some sandy soils as well. So what we go with the mid-fine or
Yeah.
sandy?
Yeah, let's go with the fine.
Okay. What corn value we will have, like
I think 420, 425.
425. Okay, let's go with 425. And then the yield goal. So this is an important thing. So the yield goal, it's one of the important things in calculating that total nitrogen initially, because if it's not accurate, you're gonna be over application or over applying, or could be under applying. But in most cases, shooting for a yield that is not sound for the area for your field, that's not gonna help. So what yield are you looking?
Yeah. Well, we usually recommend they get kind of an average, maybe over the last 3 or 5 years. Maybe from that average, bump it up 5%, maybe as a yield goal. But we try not to say, well, we're going to go max all the time.
Well, we have that tool here, so
Yeah.
you can look at your APH and see how much more or less, depending on your, probably more of your APH, you want to be. But here you can also input the different numbers for the different years, and automatically will give you an average that you can put as a yield goal for your field.
And
So let's, I don't know.
And ideally, you probably could adjust this as the season goes along. You could say maybe I have a little higher yield expectation, or the opposite, maybe you think it's not going to yield quite as much, and see if that would adjust how much fertilizer to put on.
Well, I think you hit the very right point, because one of the limitations of this nitrogen calculator is that it doesn't adjust actually with the weather and what's happening. So that's why, moving to more sensor-based technology will improve the efficiency. Still, the nitrogen calculator will probably be, 30 pounds more or less from that optimal rate. And obviously every year will change that optimal rate based on the weather conditions that we have that season. But still, if you want to go in season after you do the pre-plan application and the things change, and then you want to do a new calibration, you can rerun this calculator with the different numbers that you have and readjust that in season first application, and then you can redo it for the second application. It will have to be manually. Obviously, it's not going to be as probably as good as the sensor base, and you're going to have to rerun it, but you can still do it. Access online, it will save your field here on the side, and you can edit then on the top and redo it. So I think that's a good point, because that's one of the limitations. This is for a pre-season, calculation of your nitrogen needs for next year as a whole, and taking all the nitrogen credits and efficiency, but it doesn't take into account how it's going to be the year, because we don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so what year goal should we put here, Todd?
Let's put 275.
275. Okay, we are hitting a very high yield of corn, but let's go for that. That's a very good feel, eh?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a good year.
It's been a good year. Okay. So what's gonna be your organic matter?
2.2.
2.2 is that the field? Okay. And for the rooting depth, in general, we're gonna be looking probably the upper 4 feet. Unless you have a limitation, you can also correct that if you believe that your field maybe has some, I don't know, calcium carbonate there, or or you have some very high pH, in the third feet, and probably you believe that those roots, they don't access there, so you can change that. So then for the soil sample, there will be a default, but you can always put how deep do you sample your soil. So
Yeah, we're usually, but maybe go number 2 because I think 2 layers down.
okay, so the first layer is gonna be 0 to 8, or what would be?
Yeah, 0 to 8 inches on the first layer,
And the second?
down to 24 inches.
Okay, so basically you need to put the bottom in inches of your layer, and let's say some values that you have in that pill for ppm.
Let's go 6
6 in the upper,
And
8 inches.
and maybe 3 on the lower.
Okay, 3 on the lower. So you input your soil ppms in those 2 layers, or depending the layers that you have. Now, the previous crop, this is something important. We know that there are some so-called nitrogen credits from soybean. So if it's corn, it's gonna take into account those credits.
Yeah, let's go soybeans as the previous crop.
Okay. And then is this irrigated or
irrigated field?
Okay, we will test in an irrigated field, because actually those guidelines are for irrigated corn, so we go with there. So one of the important credits are the nitrogen credits also for irrigation. Here in West Central Nebraska, probably we don't have many issues of high nitrogen, although there are some wells that they are starting to have some nitrogen in the wells, but in other parts of the state, this is very important and a very big concern. So this calculator also account for that in-season nitrogen that you're gonna have. So
And so as far as I'm gonna say maybe 5 parts per million.
5 ppm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we'll say we're gonna put on 10 inches of irrigation water in a year.
All right, let's try with 10. And then following here, you have the option also to incorporate manure, and there are different type of manure that you can select here, and it will technically account for some of that nitrogen. But Todd, you work with manure management group, right? So
Yes.
there are some guidelines for that too, right?
Right. Yeah, we usually say that people are only putting on manure every 1 to 4 to 5 years, once in every 4 to 5 years, because there are some limitations. You don't want to put on too much in one dosage or season, but on the other hand, they can save a little bit on transportation costs, so they can put on that 20 or 25 ton to the acre when they put it on.
So you have the option here to incorporate that nitrogen credit from the manure in there, and then this calculator has the option then to the nitrogen management, how you're gonna do that splits, if you do any split or not. So here we can do a splits, or we do the custom here in that example. They're saying 30% the spring and 70 side dress, but we can change that, and we can modify those proportions here. So how we're gonna do it?
Let's try the number 15 on that program there.
The number, which one?
The 15.
This one?
Yeah, that one there. Let's see. Gives us a little bit of the spring starter, and then having the side dress, and then fertigation in season.
Well, this is what we were saying, at least 60% of that nitrogen trying to put in season. So maybe this is a good example. So some 30% in the spring as a starter, and then 60% side dress and some fertigation, which probably that side dress could be fertigation as well, depending on how you do it, in the or your technologies. Okay, so any apply nitrogen after the harvest of the previous crop?
Oh, I'm going to say no. Let's put 0 on there.
Yeah, because we're not doing any fall application or anything in this case. So here you can modify those proportions, but we say like 30% at planting.
Yes.
And we use UAN. You can also modify here the source of nitrogen that you are using. So here are the different examples of the ones that are available here. And so we use UAN.
Probably $480 a ton.
Okay, here is what you asked. It accounts for the price of the fertilizer, and application cost $15, or
Yeah,
should be fine. but you can also input the cost of application here to account for that. And then, so the side dress, what we're gonna use.
Yeah, we're gonna go with that 60% recommendation, and again, go with $480 a ton for the fertilizer using the UAN, ammonium nitrate.
All right. And then the fertigation will be the other 10%. We will put same price fertilizer,
Same price, yeah.
and same all. And here we get to the end. So now we just hitting calculating, and it should calculate the rate of nitrogen. So let's try that.
Yeah, let's try that, see what it brings up.
All right. So for this field, it's telling that the rate, the economical optimal rate, will be 158 pounds of nitrogen per acre. It gets you a cost of the fertilizer and I guess with the application per acre. And here it also gets you, well, how many gallons you're going to be applying per acre, but also the total gallons of nitrogen that you're going to need for that field. It also tells you here where you are with efficiency. So that is a very good efficiency, 0.6, right?
Yeah,
so,
I think most everyone would be happy with that type of use efficiency. 0.57, that's good.
Yeah, I do agree. And then if you want to dig more and here below is all the inputs that you put, and you can see in the calculations, how much was the total nitrogen of crop requirement there, and then the different credits from organic matter, from the soil, from the legume crop before irrigation and so forth. And those are the credits that were estimated with this nitrogen calculator. And then there are, some price component, what was the average price of that nitrogen based on what we calculated here with the inputs that we did. So again, the nitrogen calculator, it's a good tool, and as we mentioned here, you want to modify this then in system, you can come back here and you can edit the field details, and then you come back to the calculator and you can recalculate that. So for example, I don't know, we want to change the yield goal, and you can change the yield goal and recalculate that. I'll do an example. I would say, well, this comes from corn instead of coming from soybean, and let's see what's the difference in the calculator. So when we recalculate that, well, now it's saying 194. So that's kind of the legume credit that we had, that it was 158, I think, before.
Yeah, because it's around that 40 pounds an acre that we talk about sometimes.
Yeah, so those are the things that you could do, and you can test it with this calculator. So whatever you're using, you can always check those numbers and see, how close we are with that, and then, to have a more economical, optimal nitrogen rate. And as you mentioned, you can modify in season, and then obviously if you have another technology that you can do more sensor based, that's what we are going into, and it will be potentially more accurate, having to send the plan. But this is the new tool. It has been there for a while, but probably not many people know about. So we are making this video to try to make it available for more people. It's free. You can test it, and as you can see, it's easy to use.
Now, at this point, would you save it somewhere?
Well, this is being saved here. So when you go here to the bottom, it's gonna appear the field that say demonstration here on the side. And you can even generate a PDF, and it will generate you a PDF where you can print this out and save it in a folder or whatever. But I don't know if it's gonna generate only for the field. I think it's gonna generate from all the fields, so it may take a while, this one, but you can save the fields there and check it back, and you can always come back to this, click the demonstration, and then edit that.
Well, I think people hopefully will be excited about this. I think it's a great tool.
Yeah, I hope so. So I guess, Todd, I know if we have anything else, but thank you so much for being with me today and to present this in-season nitrogen management for irrigated corn. As you know, a friendly reminder to go and look at the internet for the NEP guide. That is going to be the G2365. And if you have any question, we can answer any question here in the center, or you can email or send a message.
And we have that search engine tool, cropwatch.unl.edu. And again, you can just type in, what you're looking for.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned the CrowdWatch, we are actually, so after we released this by the end of last year, so we are sending a series of CrowdWatch explaining in detail some of the guidelines here of the in-season nitrogen management. So you're gonna see a series of CrowdWatch explaining in detail some of the things that we just talking about the UNL nitrogen calculator and other factors involving the in-season nitrogen management for irrigated fields. Well, thank you so much,
Okay.
Todd.
Okay. Thank you, Nicholas.
All right, very good. So that was our that's the end of our first video. Do we have any questions for Nicholas and Todd? You can put them into the chat or click on the Q&A if there are any questions at all. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So if you think of something later, go ahead and put that into the chat or, oh, there's one. Here we go. So Nicholas and Todd, how late do you recommend putting on the last shot of fertilizer?
All right, I think I will take this one. So if you look at the nitrogen uptake curve, the peak it happened around B12 and then start to decrease the nitrogen uptake. So I would say, between Taslin and R1, that will be probably no more than that. Because then later on that uptake start decreasing pretty high, and also the crop is mobilizing all the reserves to the grain, so the roots including are decreasing their ability to capture that nitrogen from the soil. So I would say, you know I think in the guide it say up to R1 to get the fertilizer, the last shot.
Very good. Thank you, Nicholas. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the next video. Ruby?
Okay. Okay, so this video is from Chloe Martin at the Southwest Nebraska Public Health Department about nitrates and our health.
Hi, my name is Chloe Martin, and I am a program manager with Southwest Nebraska Public Health Department. Among other things, I run our private well testing program. Southwest Nebraska Public Health Department promotes health and well-being of communities, and we serve a 9-county district, which includes Chase, Dundee, Frontier, Furnace, Hayes, Hitchcock, Keith, Perkin, and Red Willow counties in Nebraska. Today, I'll be talking about the health impacts of nitrate contamination in drinking water, and later on in the presentation, I will also share a little bit about our well testing program here at the health department. So a quick overview in today's presentation, I'm going to go over water quality and why we're talking about it. I will then talk specifically about what nitrates are and how they contaminate water. We will review health impacts of high nitrate consumption, and then I will touch on water testing and treatment. So why are we talking about water quality? We consume water every day. We drink it, we use it for activities like washing dishes, cooking, and cleaning, a lot of household activities. So it's important that we know that our water is safe in order to protect the health of ourselves and our families. One way we know that water is safe is through guidance. The Federal Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, is a department, and they research water contamination, among other things, and they provide education and standards on water quality, which can be found on their website. the EPA also determines a measurement called the maximum contaminant level for water contamination. And this is a measurement that is an amount of a substance that can be found in drinking water, a limit to where it becomes harmful for human consumption. So basically, anything above a maximum contaminant level would be considered harmful. And then we treat our water in order to get a contaminant below that level so that it is safe for consumption. All public water supplies throughout the country and Nebraska are regulated for contaminants, so they have to be monitored regularly and treated so that they're safe to drink. In contrast, private wells in Nebraska don't follow any specific regulations, so it's up to private well owners to know how to test and treat their water and make sure that it is safe to drink. In the state of Nebraska specifically, 20% of people, or about 1 in 5 people in Nebraska, rely on private wells as their drinking water source. So it's really important that we educate each other and make sure that well owners are comfortable knowing how to make sure that their water is safe so that they know what to test for, how to test for it, and what treatment options they have in order to make sure that it's safe. So what is nitrate contamination? Nitrates are a certain form of nitrogen. Nitrogen is an element that occurs naturally and it is necessary for life. Specifically, nitrogen is used by plants to help them grow, which is why it's used in fertilizers. Animals also use nitrogen, so it can also be found as an animal byproduct, as an animal waste. Nitrates can become concentrated in the environment, especially from the use of fertilizers or as animal byproducts, waste from livestock. So excess amounts of nitrates can then enter into the water supply, into rivers or groundwater. And you may be putting the pieces together, but nitrates are one of the most common water contaminants of concern in Nebraska. And one large reason for this is that agricultural activities utilize nitrates and can cause them to become concentrated. So like I said, from that fertilizer use or livestock waste. And since there's a lot of agricultural activity in Nebraska, it is common to find high levels of nitrates all over the state. When there are excess nitrates, they can enter into the soil. They also may be transported by rain or flooding transported across the land. They can enter into the rivers and into lakes. They can also seep down through the soil and into our groundwater, and that's how the environment becomes contaminated. The map that's shown here is data from over 100,000 different well samples that were tested between 2003 and 2019. So each dot represents a sample that was collected and tested for nitrates, and the color of the dot on the map represents the level of nitrates that were found in the sample. And so the bright red dots are the ones that had nitrate levels above the maximum contaminant level. And you can see by looking at the map that there were some areas that had more tests done in Nebraska than others, but really you can find high levels of nitrates in the water all over the state. So why do we care about high levels of nitrates? We really are concerned mostly with the health impacts to ourselves and our family. Over time, when we drink water with high nitrate levels in them, then it enters our body and gets concentrated and becomes harmful to our health. The Environmental Protection Agency has set the maximum contaminant level for nitrates at 10 ppm or parts per million. So this is the level above which they're known for sure to be harmful to consume in water. A very small amount of nitrates in the body is natural, but when we consume too many, they become concentrated, and then this excess of nitrates in the body can actually convert into a more dangerous form of nitrogen, which is called nitrite. And nitrite is known to be a carcinogen and is linked to several negative health outcomes. Specifically, it's known to impact the way that oxygen transports throughout our body. There are many ongoing studies about health impacts of nitrates and nitrate consumption in excess. I'm going to just review some of the most well-known health impacts that have the strongest link to nitrates. So the first one is blue baby syndrome. This is a condition that results from a lack of oxygen in the blood. It is specifically dangerous to infants, and it's characterized by typically by the skin and lips turning a bluish color, which again is from that lack of oxygen in the blood. And so it is linked to infants that consume high levels of nitrates. Babies that are in their first year of life are at high risk, specifically those that are bottle fed or consume formula, because it's dependent on the water that's used to prepare those bottles. So if you're using water or well water with high levels of nitrates in them to prepare the bottles, then that's why those infants are at higher risk. And then excess nitrate consumption is also linked to several different types of cancer. The strongest link is to colorectal cancer, but it's also linked to different pediatric cancers, kidney cancers, and blood cancer. There continues to be a lot of research related to cancer and the health impacts of nitrates, so these aren't the only ones, but they're some of the ones with the strongest link. High nitrate consumption has also been linked to certain birth defects related to the spinal cord and the brain. So consumption of nitrates into the mother's body during pregnancy is harmful to both the baby and the mother. And there have also been links of nitrates to thyroid disease and thyroid cancer. Again, there are several studies on health impacts from nitrates that continue to be investigated, and we learn more about them, but this is sort of an overview of the ones that have the strongest links and are highest risk. That said, at-risk populations are specific individuals who are identified to having the most risk of being impacted from consuming nitrates. Of course, based on the last slide, it's probably not a surprise that young infants are those that are specifically at high risk, especially those that are less than 6 months of age or less, are sensitive to the effects of nitrate, but really infants throughout their first year or years of life are typically at higher risk than adults. Pregnant women are also specifically at risk. Both the baby and the mother can be harmed from nitrate consumption. Additionally, adults or anyone of any age that has a oxygen related condition, so things like anemia, cardiovascular disease, lung disease, are all at higher risk of negative health impacts from consuming nitrates, specifically because going back to that, it affecting the way that oxygen transports through the blood. And then lastly, of course, those with nitrates in their well water who are consuming it are, of course, at risk of experiencing negative health impacts from that. So I'm going to go over a quick overview on water testing for those who use well as their primary drinking source for water. It's recommended to test for nitrates every year. This is because it's an effective way to check your water quality and make sure that nitrates or other contaminants aren't entering into your well water. Additionally, it is good to specifically test for nitrates if you know that an at-risk person, so a baby or a pregnant woman, is going to start drinking the water, so that way you know that it's safe for them. And then you may also want to consider testing your water after flooding events, specifically if you know that your well is prone to contamination issues, because since the heavy rain and flooding can transport nitrates, then it's a higher risk for contamination. So for types of tests, there are simple at-home tests that you can order online and do yourself. These are a really simple way to test your water, but the tests aren't super accurate, so we really do recommend to try to use laboratory tests as opposed to an at-home test kit whenever possible. That said, laboratory tests are typically more expensive and usually have to be sent in or mailed in within certain timeframes. So if these are barriers to you, then an at-home test kit is certainly a much better option than not doing any test at all. If you do an at-home test kit and it does come back high for nitrates, then it is a really good idea to still try to find a way to get a laboratory test done if possible, especially if you're going to try to put in some type of treatment avoid device, because it gives you that more accurate baseline of your contamination levels before you start treatment. So that way, after you begin treatment, you can retest the water and make sure that it's effective. As the health department, we really do recommend that people try to do laboratory tests when possible, specifically to try to get tests done at a state certified laboratory. This is just because certified laboratories have to meet a bunch of regulations with their processes for testing and meet all of the best practices for their laboratory tests. So make sure you get a good quality test. In Southwest Nebraska, the closest state certified laboratory is the American Agricultural Laboratory in McCook. And then Southwest Nebraska Public Health Department does have a well testing program. During the months of May and September specifically, we invite in residents of our health district to come into one of our offices, either in McCook or in Ogallala, and bring in a sample of their water. And then we help them to do a simple paper test strip test for nitrates of their water. This is one of those at-home forms of testing. And then we follow up with education and resources on water testing and how to follow up with laboratory tests, what other types of tests to perform on your water, knowledge about additional water contaminants and treatment options, essentially all of the things that I'm going over in this presentation today. So that way people begin to learn how to test their well and feel more comfortable doing it on their own. Mitigation, there are several treatment options to help remove nitrates or other contaminants from drinking water in order to make it safe for consumption. Reverse osmosis is definitely the most common. It uses a screen filter method to remove nitrates from water. There are a couple other types. Ion exchange is a form that uses magnetism. Electrodialysis uses electric current to remove contaminants from water. It is common to put filters at the source of where you get your drinking waters, meaning at a specific sink you may put in the device and then whichever sinks that you pull the water out of, but it is possible to install a larger system that can then filter all the water coming out of a well before it enters the home. So today we have focused specifically on nitrates, but there are other water contaminants that impact health. So it is best to contact a professional who can help you decide what all to test for with your water and then identify comprehensive treatment options for you based on all of your test results, because different treatment options will be effective for various contaminants and you want to address all of the contaminants in your water, not just one specific one. It's also important to consider the condition of your well and whether any maintenance needs to be done. Water testing is a really good way to identify if there are structural issues or damaged components for your well that are causing contamination, and proper well maintenance will help prevent that contamination and protect your water quality. Lastly, I have linked several resources and information sources that the health department uses for education and for the presentation today. We also have additional resources on our website, which can be found at the link shown here. And that wraps up the presentation for today. Southwest Nebraska Public Health Department is more than happy to share more information on water quality and testing for private well owners. We are able to share resources on where to test and finding professionals to help with any potential treatment options. We can be contacted at the email or phone number found here.
Get a little more insight in nitrate soil testing. So, welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, Ruby.
First off, can you tell us a little bit about your lab and the types of soil tests you typically run?
Absolutely. In 1976, Dr. Bob Olson started the laboratory in McCook, Nebraska, with the philosophy of supplying the agricultural industry with high-quality analytical services and realistic research-based interpretations. I joined the lab staff in 1987 and managed the laboratory until my wife Christine and I purchased the business from Dr. Olson in 2007. To represent the many areas of the country that we serve and to emphasize our commitment to the advancement of agriculture and food production in this country, We changed the name to American Agricultural Laboratory in 2014. Having outgrown the original lab space, we moved into our current location, which at the time was a newly renovated lab space in 2016. As for what we test here, most of the soil analysis is performed at our facility in chemical form in order to determine the nutrient content of the soils. The demand for soil health determination has grown significantly in recent years, which includes the measurement of microbial activity through CO2 respiration. We also perform physical testing, such as particle size analysis, bulk density, and aggregate stability.
Do you test nitrate in other things as well, like food or water?
Yes, we do a lot of feed and forage testing for nitrate to determine whether or not the feed is safe. Also, we are DHHS certified to test public and private wells for nitrate.
So can you walk us through the process of testing soil for nitrate, from when you get the samples at the lab until, we get a final report?
Yes, most of our samples come in via shipments from UPS, USPS, or FedEx. When they are received, they are sorted according to the client-filled submittal form. Lab positions are then assigned on both the submittal and the soil sample itself. The samples are placed on a drying rack, which then go into a drying room that is at a constant temperature of 95 degrees Fahrenheit with the use of fans to remove the moisture. Early the next day, the samples are ground to pass a 2 mm sieve and then placed on trays and taken into the lab benches for scooping. Now, when I talk about scooping, rather than weighing the ground soil, a volume of soil is taken using calibrated scoops. The sample is transferred into flasks that are held in foam trays. An extractant is added to these flasks, sealed, and placed on a reciprocating shaker. Note that many scoop volumes, extract volumes, and shaking times are used depending on the method.
Okay. So what kind of extract might you use for a nitrate test?
Because nitrate is highly soluble in water, the extract that we use is water. We can also use potassium chloride extract to take out the nitrate from soils, especially when we're wanting to also determine the ammonium content within the soil.
Um, so I know, farmers are putting on different types of, nitrogen sources. Could a farmer do a test that captured all of the nitrogen that's in the soil?
Yes, we also perform total nitrogen by combustion, and that is a view of all the different forms, both organic and inorganic, that are in the soil. And then we can break it down and be even more precise by running total nitrogen, ammonium, nitrate, nitrite in the soil itself.
Okay. What are the common sources of error that you see in nitrate test results? Maybe from sampling or something.
A lot of times we'll see excess mineralization occur because the sample was taken, put into a Ziploc bag or a polyline soil bag, and then it was put up on the dashboard and allowed to heat in the sun, or just left in the back of the truck and having the same effect upon the soil. And it really exaggerates many of the constituents within the soil and is not realistic of what's in the field. Another source of error is just not taking enough core samples.
Okay. So when you're running lots of samples and you're doing lots of different things, how are you able to ensure that there's accuracy and consistency in the nitrate analyses across?
The proficiency of our laboratory is dictated by the Nebraska Department of Agriculture. Soil test labs operating within the state of Nebraska are required by law to follow the testing regulations and the proven protocols set forth by the state. We must prove our proficiency both internally and by outside sources. For soil testing, we participate in the North American Proficiency Testing Program and also hold their Performance Assessment Program accreditation. We also voluntarily participate in the Agricultural Laboratory Proficiency Program. We are certified by the Minnesota Department of Agriculture as a soil testing lab and a Missouri State and Iowa State approved soil testing lab. What all this means is that we must adhere to stringent protocols to ensure accuracy. For example, to validate consistency through every daily run, purchased soil samples of known concentration are placed approximately every 25 samples. The results of these samples allow us to monitor the process and confirm accuracy by breaking the large run into many smaller data sets. If a control result is found to be an outlier, then the results in that area of the run are retested from the last and the next acceptable control positions. And this is just one of the many protocols we perform every day.
Okay. And you mentioned, this is required by the Nebraska Department of Agriculture. So every lab in the state of Nebraska is doing this, right? They all have
Yes.
to follow these, having those controls. Is Nebraska, do all states require this, or some states have more stringent controls?
Nebraska was the flagship on this program. None of the states had this, according to my sources, prior to the Soil and Plant Act of 1978 here in Nebraska. There are other states that have since taken the example and are doing the same type of requirements. But yes, Nebraska is the first to have started that.
Okay. So after a farmer sends in their soil, how quickly could they expect the results?
2 to 3 day turnaround is typical. We can get it out in one day if everything lines up just right. During peak seasons, for instance, before planting and after harvest, it may add a day or two, but for the most part, 2 to 3 days.
Okay. So after you've got the soil ran on the analyzers and we got their report, probably a lot of numbers on there. How should producers or consultants interpret these nitrate results in terms of nitrogen availability or fertilizer decisions?
The nitrate value reported should be credited when making a fertilizer recommendation. For instance, if the producer knows how many bushels they want to grow and are applying a factor to determine their nitrogen recommendation, they should remove the credit that we are giving them on nitrate. They can also contact the laboratory to find out what our recommendations are, which are based on land-grant university research studies. In doing that, we're also crediting organic matter, 10 pounds per nitrogen per 1% organic matter for short season crops, and 20 pounds per acre nitrogen per 1% organic matter for long season crops. We do report in both part per million and pounds per acre, and that is determined by multiplying the part per million of the report times the depth in inches times a constant of 0.3.
Okay. And your reports are based on a 0 to 6 inch depth, right?
That is correct.
But I'm sure people could also sample deeper and go down further and really find out exactly how much nitrate they could credit.
Yes, and that is good to know what's in the profile, because what may be available to the plant, rather than over applying and realizing that there was something that the plant could uptake that was just not in that 0 to 6 inch. And we will take those deep samples into account when we're making our recommendations.
Okay. So is there a perfect time to test soil for nitrate, or is it somewhat dependent on each farm's nitrogen management plan?
It does vary significantly between the different producers and when they've historically taken the samples. Many pull their samples right after harvest to make the decisions for the following crop. Ultimately, it would be best to take the sample right before the crop is planted to ensure optimum nutrient availability and less risk of leaching or loss.
Okay. And then speaking of leaching, does soil type play a factor in what our nitrate results look like? And I know that's kind of broad, but in general.
In general, yes, the nitrates are more likely to leach in sandy soils. Of course, you need moisture to also bring about that process. But clay soils, finer texture soils tend to not leach as much as sandy soils.
How does nitrate testing fit in with environmental concerns? A soil nitrate test, how does that affect, maybe when we're thinking about drinking water?
It's known that excess nitrogen fertilization can lead to groundwater contamination, and the 4 R's of nutrient management come to mind. Using the right source, the right rate, the right time, and the right place. And it is very important to note that both potable and irrigation water should be tested annually for the nitrate concentrations.
So if someone was testing the irrigation water and they had, X amount of nitrate, they could definitely include that in their nitrate credits.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And finally, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who's submitting a soil nitrate test, what would that be?
Submitting a representative sample is critical to make the best fertilizer decisions. Each sample should consist of 10 to 15 cores for every 60 acres or less, if not uniform, smaller area of non-uniform soil. And then taking the subsoil samples, as we discussed, would help them give a more complete picture and reduce the amount of nitrogen that they need to apply.
Okay. And then just one more thought on not necessarily nitrate soil testing, but if someone wanted to test their drinking water for nitrates, would it be best to call you or contact the lab?
Yes, because we are DHH certified, we have to use sample bottles, sample kits that we have tested to make sure they don't have contaminants and that they are pure and have traceability back to our laboratory as opposed to bringing them in a mason jar or a used water bottle.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for participating in our webinar, and it was very interesting to hear about what you guys do.
And thank you for including us, Ruby.
Very well.
My name is Ruby Collins, and I'm a Crops and Water Extension Educator with Nebraska Extension. This presentation will give you a better picture of what the NERIA program is, how it works, and what steps you need to take if you'd like to participate. We'll also look at how the program's different priority areas are structured, how incentive payments are calculated, and how to make sure your application and documentation are submitted correctly. Let's start with the basics, what exactly this new program is designed to do. The NERIA program was created through Nebraska Legislative Bill 1368 to provide financial incentives to producers who voluntarily reduce their commercial nitrogen fertilizer use. It officially started in 2025, and it's designed to support farmers who are making measurable reductions in nitrogen application while maintaining productivity. Participants must verify that they've reduced their fertilizer rates by either up to 40 pounds of nitrogen per acre or 15% of their baseline application rate, whichever is less. These reductions are verified through local NRDs, and the program is funded by the Nebraska Corn Board. The goal is to improve water quality by reducing nitrate levels while recognizing producers who take proactive steps in nutrient management. So this is how the state of Nebraska is generally sorted into the different priority areas. And you can see the priority A is in this pink, B is gray, and C is all the rest of it. You will need to confirm the priority area with your NRD for accuracy. We will cover how payments affect each priority area next. Priority Area A includes the regions in Nebraska where nitrate concerns are most significant. These are typically wellhead protection areas or irrigated lands that are already classified in Phase 2 or higher management levels by the NRDs. In most cases, producers in these areas already collect detailed nitrogen data, which helps establish their baseline. To qualify for incentive payments, you'll need to demonstrate the required nitrogen reduction compared to that baseline. The payment rate for producers in Priority Area A is $15 per acre. This area is considered the highest priority because it represents zones where water quality improvement is most urgently needed. Priority Area B covers irrigated acres that fall outside of the high priority nitrate areas. Producers in these regions still have the opportunity to participate and earn incentives by showing nitrogen reductions, but the process for establishing a baseline may differ slightly. There are two main ways to do this. Option 1 is to submit the nitrogen application data already reported to the NRD for the previous 3 growing seasons. Option 2 is to complete soil sampling prior to the cropping season in which you're requesting the incentive. Once those records are verified and the reduction is confirmed, producers in Priority Area B can receive $12 per acre as an incentive payment for meeting the program's requirements. Priority Area C includes all other parts of the state that aren't covered under Areas A or B. These are typically locations where nitrate concentrations are lower, but the state still wants to encourage good nitrogen management practices. Producers here can also establish their baseline nitrogen levels either through previous NRD reporting or through soil sampling before the growing season. The same process for verification applies. Reductions must be documented and submitted through the NRD. The incentive rate for this group is $10 per acre for verified reductions. So while the payment is a bit lower, it still rewards producers who are managing nitrogen efficiently and contributing to statewide water quality goals. One of the great things about the NERIA program is that producers have flexibility in how they achieve their nitrogen reductions. You can choose the methods, products, or practices that work best for your operation. However, it's important to note that you cannot substitute other nitrogen sources, such as manure or wastewater, for the reduced commercial fertilizer. The program is focused on reductions in commercial nitrogen use only. To receive your incentive payment, all documentation must be submitted to and approved by your NRD before November 15th of the following year. And remember, you must have already completed the application process and been approved for the program before any payments can be made. To participate in the program, producers must be in good standing with their local NRD rules and regulations. Each application must be filed per field with a limit of 160 acres per application. The deadline to apply is November 15th or the next business day if that date happens to fall on a weekend. Once your application is reviewed, you'll be notified no later than December 15th whether it has been approved or denied. Producers who participated in 2025 can also apply again in 2026 as long as the reductions occur on different fields. Incentive payments are distributed after the producer submits all necessary documentation verifying that the required nitrogen reduction has been achieved. To summarize the process, each field must have its own completed application submitted to your local NRD before November 15th. NRDs will review and prioritize applications depending on available funding and local needs. Before November 15th of the following year, you'll need to submit supporting documentation that shows your nitrogen reductions meet the program's requirements. Once the NRD verifies those reductions, payment will be issued before November 15th of that same year. Essentially, the process includes applying, documenting, verifying, and finally receiving your incentive. Following these steps carefully ensures your participation goes smoothly and that your operation gets full credit for your nitrogen management efforts. If you're ready to get started or have questions about your eligibility, the best next step is to contact your local NRD representatives. If you're in the Upper Republican NRD, your contact is going to be Nate Jenkins. If you're in the Middle Republican NRD, your contact is Sylvia Johnson. And for Twin Platte, it will be Alexa Davis. As each NRD is handling the program to their own needs and requirements, these contacts are here to help walk you through the application process, make sure your documentation is complete, and ensure that your nitrogen reduction practices qualify for payment. So you'll definitely want to make sure you contact them first. Thank you for taking the time to learn about the NERIA program and our webinar on nitrogen management in general, and for your commitment to improving Nebraska's water and soil health. Thank you.